with Louise Hay, like thyroid is like you not speaking up. It's like you quieting. And so I believe females are so trained to stand like back and just take it
Yeah.
and not raise their voice
Yeah.
and just endure abuse.
Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're going to jump into this is probably a controversial topic, but we're going to dive into it because that's what we always do. We're going to be talking about femininity, periods, a lot that has to do with females. Let's just say that, and some shame that can come around that kind of stuff. So let's jump in. So in case we haven't met, my name is Karen.
And my name is Ashley. And I think this is a good one too, just because me and you are so different. Like
Yeah.
you have very easy periods, if I can say that.
I do.
Um,
I really do.
and mine are or have been awful, like
Mhm.
unbelievably awful. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see those two differences as well. Did your mom have periods that were awful
No,
or
she had, I never knew when she had her period. Like I didn't, she wasn't like same as me, right? Like super like level with her emotions. Like she wasn't just out of control. She never complained about, having any sort of cramping, like never, ever.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so like, yeah, I look at my periods and I'm like, yeah, it kind of fits the same bill as that, right? And
Yeah.
so it does beg the question. I think there's a lot that can go into this, right? Like
Mhm.
I do think that a lot of that does have to do with my upbringing and how I viewed a period, right? I remember as I was getting into like my teenage years, like as I entered like 13 and like puberty's really hitting for girls at that point. I remember my parents talking about hormones and stuff, but it was never like an overly dramatic way that they talked about it. Like some people I listen to and they're talking about how they're telling their girls like you're going to feel this way, and it's almost like they're incepting that into their girl's brain, like it's going to make your emotions wild and blah blah blah. I honestly like I remember having a conversation with my mom about periods and what they were, but it was always just like a this is what's going to happen. Your body is going to be basically flushing out your uterus every month, right? Like, this is just what happens. And it was like very much a biological thing. There was nothing that was, you're going to have these intense emotional outbreaks and that kind of thing. And that was never really anything. And not, I'm not saying that anybody has had that, but it wasn't, first of all, it wasn't demonstrated for me that that's how it was going to be. And it was never told to me that it was going to
Yeah.
be that way either. And so for me, I do think a lot of how we live our life is how we perceive the world. And
Mhm.
so what was given to me is how I live my life, right? And so my body doesn't hold on to these subconscious thoughts of how something has to be. And
Mhm.
the truth about the subconscious mind is it can be a real bitch until you really figure it out, right? Until you really figure out what are my belief patterns? What are
Yeah.
the things that I don't know that I believe about a certain thing? And am
Mhm.
I living out that belief every day?
Mhm.
And like I said, this is probably super controversial for a lot of people. Like you're probably listening to me right now and going, "Fuck you, Karen." Like how could you tell me that? But I really do question if a lot of the reason that I have literally the easiest periods is because of how I was brought up around it. It wasn't a big deal. It just was something that your body did in order to like release things so that it could go back into this whole other cycle again, you know? So it was never anything weird or taboo or anything like that. So,
Yeah. And like for me, it's like it flip-flopped, but my period still was consistently awful. Um, and like I look at my mom and her whole family, like what's it called when you have your uterus like burned?
an ablation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my every aunt, every great aunt, my mom, all of them have done that because their
Yeah.
periods were so heavy, so long, so emotional. Like yeah, my mom would be crazy emotional on her period. Um, and yeah, they were never a good thing. My dad to this day can't handle, he's a little bit better, but like if I was to go and buy tampons, he couldn't come into the store with me because that was a girl thing.
Huh.
Even if I wanted to buy like a like teen magazine, he would go first and buy what he wanted to buy and then pass me his debit card and I could buy my girl magazine. Like he couldn't do it.
That's
And
so funny.
yeah. And so then like if I'm talking about anything like coffee enemas or like period stuff, he's like, "Do we really have to be talking about this right now? Like, is this really a thing?" Like he really hates it. And it's like it's weird because like I'll be talking to him on the phone while like taking a shit and he knows and he's cool.
Yeah.
And he'll take a shit while talking to me on the phone and I know and I'm cool and he's cool. Like and so it's like this weird like we're comfortable with that, but then as soon as we start like talking details about anything, like I'm like, oh no, I'm doing coffee enema right now. He's like, do you really have to tell me that? But like if I say I'm taking a poop right now, no big deal. Like
Yeah.
it's weird,
Hmm.
but yeah. So there was a lot of like I don't know. And it wasn't shame, but it was just like weird dynamics around it. And so my I think I hid my period for 2 years where I didn't tell my mom for 2 years and I just would like use toilet
Stop it.
paper,
Really?
feel bad
Oh,
and all that
wow.
stuff. So I got my period Christmas Day, grade 6, like easy to remember.
Yeah, for real.
And it was like I was always consistent. I always had it around the 25th of every month. And it was so regular, so heavy. I would be so emotional. It was painful. Like my cramping was unbelievable. And yeah, and then I got into like my high school years and I would like tell everyone. Like it was like no big deal. Like I would like be like, "Oh, I'm on my period right now." And it was like it went from this like huge secret to like, oh yeah, everyone can know. And I had no shame of talking about it at all. But it was still this awful period. And in grade 12, I had a lot of stress in my life and I started passing out. Like I would faint and get really lightheaded and dizzy because my period was so bad and I had such low iron. So it has gone through like a series of a lot of really not great phases. And like we've talked about, like you can heal your life by Louise Hay a couple of times. And she says in there, like if you have bad PMS, it's because you're rejecting your femininity.
Yeah.
And I always did. I always wanted to be masculine. I always was the tomboy. I wasn't good at sports, but like I liked pink and then everything else was boyish in
Mm.
my life. And um so like I really rejected a lot of femininity. I saw it as a lot of weakness and that kind of thing. Got started in business at a young age and really had like just that whole masculine job outlook and everything. So like that fits too. So
Yeah, yeah. So, one thing I want to kind of bring in too is Dr. Joe calls them energy centers, but a lot of people know them by chakras, right? So, your first and second chakra, if they're blocked in any way, which your first and second chakra have to do
yeah.
with that area of your body, right? Has to do with all of that stuff. If either one of those are blocked by certain thoughts or whatever, a lot of times it does come down to things like, and I know you said you don't have shame or guilt, but there can be like subconscious shame and guilt that is wrapped around it too, right? So, like the fact that my question is like the fact that your dad had so much shame and guilt, like, is it possible that that could have subconsciously been transferred to you? Because like my dad never cared. He would go in and buy shit for my mom all the time, right? Like it didn't matter to him. It was just like, oh, it's just another thing for him to buy. Like there was not even a thought about it, right? So I'm just curious though, like that's something that I think about all the time with like generational traumas that are passed down to us without us even thinking about it. And it's just in our subconscious mind, it's in our subconscious thoughts and in our body somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. I personally don't feel like it came from my dad. I
Mm.
feel like it came from my mom's side.
Okay.
Um, I don't know what the females in my dad's family's life are like with their periods. I know I take after my dad's side a lot more in a lot of ways. So I don't know for sure, but I know on my mom's side, everyone struggled with their period for sure. And like my grandma passed away from thyroid cancer. And to me, like again with Louise Hay, like thyroid is like you not speaking up. It's like you quieting. And so I believe females are so trained to stand like back and just take it
Yeah.
and not raise their voice
Yeah.
and just endure abuse. And my grandma endured so much abuse. And so when she had thyroid cancer, I'm like, that makes sense, you know? My mom is now having issues with her thyroid. I've had issues with my thyroid just with like gaining weight and struggling with like low energy and that kind of stuff. And so, and that was throughout high school. I had issues with my thyroid, and I never experienced any type of like abuse or what's it called? Like and I was very loud. I was never a girl that stood back and like took it ever. And so I don't think that it's necessarily like firsthand. And like from what I've seen from my mom, I don't think that she ever took it either. Like
Mm,
I think that she was probably more of a people pleaser in a sense, but she never took abuse in any shape or form from my dad.
mm.
Um so I think it's generational. I think that like it's like was passed down. Like my grandma had really bad abuse situation, and then that passed down. And then all of my grandma's sister-in-laws, they had a really toxic father, and they all are the ones that struggle with their periods too. And so I think it's kind of like that kind of thing is like that shutting down your female femininity, your voice, and like just being pushed to the side and taking that abuse.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it came from my dad's side so much, but I definitely can see there's a lot of unresolved trauma generationally from my mom's side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention too, because I love Louise Hay, but I don't feel like it's always like it's not all like when you're looking at that book, you can heal your life. There are some things for me that correlate, but sometimes it's like I need to actually ask my body what that means, right? So,
Mhm.
for example, you were talking about like thyroid and your throat and speaking your truth and that kind of thing. For me, what I have discovered about myself, and this is going to be different for everybody. So, understand that at the end of the day, you need to do your own seeking of your own body. You can't always listen to what someone else will tell you something means. So for me, I have had this like constriction on my throat at times, right? It feels like it just feels like a constriction, okay? And I've asked myself so many times because I am so outspoken. If I don't like something, I'm going to tell you. I would never take any sort of crap from anybody. Like if somebody was to be like, "Oh, this person's going to tell you not to do that," and I'm like, "Well, have them tell me. Like, come at me, bro." Like that kind of thing. So I'm not afraid to speak my truth and tell somebody how I feel. But for me, I still was like, I still have this constriction. What is it? So the thing that I discovered is that that constriction for me is when I am trying to control a situation.
Mhm.
Period. End of story. Okay. And a lot of that does have like masculine roots kind of thing, but it's really me trying to control a situation. Okay.
Mhm.
And so it does in some ways relate to what Louise Hay says, but most of for me, I had to go like, yeah, that's not quite it. And I really had to meditate to figure this one out because this one took me a long time. I know like a year or two ago, Ashley, you and I talked about this where I was like, I have this constriction on my throat. I can't figure out what it is. And it would always be because I was trying to control something. Okay, something in my external environment. And so that's where I had to really discover for myself, what is my body trying to tell me for
Mm-hmm.
me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are certain things that, yes, it relates to what like Louise Hay says or what other people have even told me. But most of the time, I got to figure it out. And by figuring it out, I got to sit with myself and really ask my body, what is this? What am I doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like when you said that, if you want me to give you unsolicited feedback, I don't know if you want that or
Go
not.
for it. No, go for it. Have fun.
My initial response was I'm like, oh, your constriction of your throat is from religion, like that religious trauma. And so you've come leaps and bounds from where you were with everything like religion wise, but your family is still in it. And so that was my initial thoughts is that it's a generational trauma of like the constriction because your parents are pretty constricted, especially when you're a child with your religion. So I don't know if that aligns or not. And then feeling constricted with where you work. Those were my
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah, that doesn't fully fit from what this is literally a soul searching thing that I literally had to figure this out, right? Like I literally had to sit with myself because there was this will happen either at the hospital or when I'm home or doing whatever, right? And so I had to really sit with myself and be like, what the fuck am I doing? And
Yeah.
so that's how come I can be like, yeah, I can see what you're saying, and there could be roots there, but it doesn't feel like it at the same time. So it's always just like, I personally think that it's always about sitting with yourself and
Mhm.
asking, where did this come from? Is it related to something else too? Because I've also noticed that I have hip tightness that
Mhm.
can extend down my right leg as well, which it can be, it's masculine based for sure, but that happens when I am trying to control a situation. So it's all related, and I can tell it is. Like the more that I sit with it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it is. 100 fucking percent, you know, but it took me a while to figure it out because I really would like in the past I would have been like, yeah, maybe Ashley, but now I'm like, that just doesn't feel right because I've sat with it so much and been like, okay, what would happen if I just let go of this situation and just allowed myself to feel free in that situation? And that's when that constriction opens. And I'm
Mhm.
like, yep, that's what it is. Hello, you know? So my thing is like to kind of like bring this back to the whole femininity thing is like when you're looking at your body and how it is responding to situations, ask your body all the time. Is this actually like does this fit the regular air quote thing that like Louise Hay says or other people in your life say, right? Like cuz I've had many energy clearings, you've done Reiki on me, and I've literally had to be like, okay, what did they tell me? And what actually makes sense in my body, what actually feels right. So yeah, it's like when you're going back to like the whole period thing, if you're sitting with yourself and you're going, okay, period, what is this? What do I need to know? What do I
Mhm.
need to understand about this situation? How come I am like debilitated every time I have my period? What is that? Is there something that I'm subconsciously holding on to? And this can sometimes take, in my opinion, hours of sitting with yourself,
Mhm.
hours of really feeling out your body. And I literally have, like, in my brain, got into those parts of my body that feel tight, constricted, painful, whatever. And I will literally be like, I'm going to sit with you until we figure this out. And it
Mhm.
takes hours sometimes because I meditate every day, right? Sometimes I
Mhm.
don't get the answer the first time I do it. Sometimes I don't get the answer the second time I do it. But after doing it over and over and over again, your subconscious brain finally goes, okay, this is what you're dealing with. This is what's going on for you. And then as you kind of play with it in your conscious waking hours, you kind of go, oh, that is what I'm doing. That
Mhm.
is the thing that I'm holding on to. And I didn't even realize it. And the thing that I've learned, especially with bodily things, most of the time people can't tell me what they mean, right? Like most of the, I don't know, because the reason I say that is because I have had those like personal clearings and stuff, and somebody will be like, "Oh, this is what's happening." They'll be able to feel the thing, but they don't always get, sometimes they do, but they don't always get the subconscious belief behind it.
Mhm.
And so me really sitting with myself has actually helped me be like, oh, that is what I'm doing. And I had no idea. And so now I can be like, okay, when I notice that I'm doing it, because really the only way to break a subconscious pattern is to know that you're doing it.
Mhm.
Literally. If you don't know you're doing it, you can't change it, right? Like nothing changes if you don't really know what's happening. So you have to know, okay, this is what I'm doing. Once you
Yeah.
know that, now you can have a plan for what do I want to do now? This is what I don't want to do. What do I want to do now? And so you can use that same thought process like with periods, with pain, with anything, really. Like it's a process too. It's part of it.
So yeah, I completely agree with you that you have to know what you are doing to be able to change it. And I think that some of us dive way too much into the past for
Mm,
that. I was reading a book just yesterday and it talks about that, where he's like, I'm moving forward. I
yeah.
really don't care about my past. It's what am I doing right now? My awareness of like this present moment and how can I change this moment? And I think there's a lot of like self-discovery that people are doing, where they're trying to find themselves. And it's like, no, we just need to create ourselves. Like, who do you want to be? And like, be aware of what you're doing right now and what habits you want to put into place of that. And I think that fits very much with the femininity in the sense that so many females are quiet and feeling suppressed and that kind of stuff. And so it's like we don't have to figure out what childhood trauma happened, what generational thing happened. Like I was talking about my mom's side, like that's just casual conversation. At the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
It's sometimes nice to understand things,
Mhm.
but you can get so lost in the weeds and so lost in, oh my God, my life was so bad. I had all these things happen. Okay, who cares? What are you doing now?
Mhm.
Like, you can read books and books about people, like go read Man's Search for Meaning. Um, and like by Viktor Frankl. Like you can have so much bad happen to you. It doesn't matter. Like, and I think for us as females, we get really stuck in like we have this happening to us and we can't do anything because of it. We're victims to it, where the men make the rules and call the shots. And it's just, there's a lot of society stuff that talk about that, where a lot of value is placed on females for being sexy or whatever it is. And then like social media talks a lot about how periods are awful and you're emotional and females are just emotional. Like there's no value there because you're so emotional. And go eat chocolate and drink wine on your period and like or chocolate and cheese. And chocolate and cheese are the worst things for you on your period because they inflame your uterus. And so if you do have period cramps and you're eating chocolate because you have period cramps, you're just literally fueling the fire. And then sometimes I think maybe men are actually trying to do that as a way to suppress us, you know? Like maybe there is that marketing specifically for the things that are going to make us feel worse and hold us down more. Like and all that kind of stuff. And so it's really about, okay, where am I at right now? And who do I want to be? And I'm not going to make any excuses or anything like that. And change.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I do think that we are programmed more than we think we are
Oh,
on a regular
100%.
basis. Like, to kind of explain this a little bit in depth with like biology, males and females are not that far different. Let's be honest, okay? But we would be led to believe that we are, right?
Mhm.
Like, but when you look at us biologically, there is literally negligible amounts that are super different. But we as a culture, as a society, as a world, have decided that men act this way, men do these things, women do these things, women have this happen to them, men have this happen to them, right? And so that programs us more than we know. Okay. Like that's the thing. Like I remember having a conversation with my brother about this years ago. Okay. And he was like up in arms because of what I was saying. I was like, honestly, men and women aren't that different. Okay. We're really not that different when you look at us. We have evolved in a way to our brains are so freaking powerful. We have no idea. We have evolved into a way where our brain says that women should have smaller musculature. And so our subconscious brain says, okay, your wish is your command. Women have
Mhm.
smaller musculature. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to go into this any more in depth because if somebody's not tracking with me, like that's okay. Just look up the biology. When you look at when somebody is in utero,
Mhm.
the difference between fetuses, there is literally no difference. Okay.
Mhm.
Like we are all male and female when we're in the womb. And you can look this up. I'm not making this up. This is like scientific studies too, that it's like, oh, it's the same. It's
Mhm.
only within the last, oh God, I can't even, I don't want to like say the wrong thing. So I'm not going to go too detailed, but there's a certain time when you're in utero that your body develops a penis or a vagina. And really the penis and the vagina are pretty much the same.
Mhm.
Okay. It's just the structures end up looking differently. Right. And so that when you look at the biology of males and females and how very similar we are, the question is, how programmed are you to believe that you have to act a certain way a certain time of month? How programmed are you to believe that you as a man have to make all the money in the house? Like, right? Like that's not a biological one, but like think about all the things that we're programmed as men and women to believe about ourselves. Women are generally considered to be the ones that stay home with the kids, right? Like, how programmed are you to believe that that's the only way it has to be, right?
Mhm.
And so these subconscious programs really do control our lives more than we think they do in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah. And like with that, like I could just like as a very side note, also listening to your body is really important. Like, so for me, like I was trained to be masculine.
yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? Like this isn't serving me. Like it's not working for me. And the more I allowed myself to be feminine, the more my periods got better.
Mm,
Like they got significantly better the more feminine I allowed myself, along with not eating the chocolate and the dairy right before my period and during makes a massive difference. And coffee enemas, game changer for me, you know? I literally started doing coffee enemas every single day instead of a couple times a week just because I kept noticing how much better it was helping my period and it was a game changer. So, like, when you think about life and like what's going on around you, it's easy to find like the differences between like that's a man, that's a woman, and but it doesn't matter. It's like listen to what you need.
right.
And so for some females, they want to be working, they want to be calling the shots, you
Mhm.
know, and others don't. And same with men. So, and then is that because of trauma? Like I always thought I wanted to be working like crazy, you know? And then I went through a stage where I didn't want to at all. And now I'm getting back to the place where I'm like, no, I want to be doing something.
Mhm.
And so we're allowed to go through those phases, whether we're a man or a woman, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just also realizing that, um, our culture, in my opinion, is very masculine oriented, right? It just is. Like I don't care who you are. It's just very masculine oriented. Like since I was a child, I was told that if I wanted to have a good life, I had to go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a good job after college, like that whole thing. That's a very masculine way to look at life. A very
Yeah.
feminine way to look at life is to allow yourself to experience and feel life. That
Hmm.
is a whole different way to look at life, right? Like, so if my parents had come at me from childhood to be like, do you enjoy school? Well, if
Hmm.
you enjoy it, keep doing it, right? But that's not something that's allowed
Yeah.
because it's like our culture is like, no, you have to be able to make money because you need to contribute to society. It's just,
Yeah.
there's nothing right or wrong about it. Neither way is right or wrong, but many of us, like probably yourself, definitely myself, have found myself in situations where I'm like, I don't actually want to do this, but I almost have to because I have to pay the bills, right? So you find yourself in these situations because of the way that culture is set up, where you're like, well, I find myself where I am currently in a state where I have to do this. Um, and it's almost like for myself, I'm looking at the subconscious programs that tell me that I have to do that, and how might I create something without having to work physically, right? It's a whole other way to look at your life. Okay. And that's not something that's really trained to us as children. As a child, I was never told how to manifest. Nobody told me that I was a super powerful manifester. And so I didn't realize it until I became an adult that I was a manifester. And so now I've had to go back and look at subconscious programs that tell me I have to go to a job or I have to make money in order to survive, right? I mean, that's a huge subconscious program that a lot of us fall into. And it takes practice of, first of all, noticing that that's the way that you are, and then asking yourself, do I like it? If I don't
Mhm.
like it, then that means that I have some noticing to do, right? I
Yeah.
have to notice the times when I say things like I have to do this because I have to pay for the bills, right? Like
Mhm.
I have to notice that. I have to pay attention, and then I have to go, okay, well, how can I get into a state of creation around it so that I can just create through my
Mhm.
thoughts and my feelings? It's a totally different way to look at life. So,
Well, and I think that's a whole nother topic that I
it
could
is.
really dive into. And this is one that I really probably struggle with the most,
I get it. Yeah.
how to raise kids in this,
Oh, me too.
because um, I was trained, go to school, get good grades, work hard. My parents still work 80-hour weeks at their businesses. They should be retiring and they're still working their face off.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm moving out of that phase, and have been for the last few years. But like it's ingrained in me, like
It's
to
a
work hard,
process.
work hard. And um and so I know that there is like the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I know that I can manifest, I can create massive things with little amounts of time. Um, and so that's there. And I have like the last 5 years of my life, I have barely worked and I have brought in good money. Um, and not as great as I used to, but compared to what I was doing, I was making good money for nothing as opposed to great money for a lot, you know? Um, and so with my kids, I'm like, I have to work, I have to do this. And they're like, well, why? Like, why do you have to? I'm like, because I like having this lifestyle. I like what I do, and I want that to keep going. And so it's really hard. Like, how do you teach your kids in this like screen, like I had chores growing up. Like I had
Yeah.
lots of chores, responsibilities. I also was an oldest child. I don't know if my brother and sister did as much as I did, but I had a lot of responsibilities. And I talked to other families and friends, and no kids that I know do chores. And I'm just like, that's so strange to me. And like they literally like we just got back from Mexico and there was kids in Mexico carrying around tablets the whole time. I'm just like, that we're literally raising this next generation, and I'm afraid of how lazy they're going to be. And so I'm trying to teach my kids work ethic and passion and drive. And to them, it feels like hard work. And like even just like my middle son was learning how to use one of those like boards on a wheel. I don't know what they're called.
Mm.
But it's hard. It's a lot of balance.
Oh, okay.
And so our neighbor has one, and like it's like a hoverboard. I don't know what they're
Okay. Yeah.
called.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what they're called either.
And so he was trying, and I'm like, you have to engage your core. And so I was teaching him how to engage his core. And he's like, oh, but that's so painful and way too hard. I don't want to do that. And I'm just no, that's it's just like how are we ever going to train kids to be good with doing hard things? And I'm reading this book about these people that are running like marathons and death races and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, we're capable of so much,
Absolutely.
but we are such fucking babies, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm a baby, and then my kids are even more of a baby than I am. And so, how do you juggle that hard work is good, but hard work isn't life, you know?
Listen, if you figure it out, you tell me, because this is where my masculine sometimes takes over, because I'm like, I know I can do that shit. Like, I
Yeah.
have always been in sports. I've always been good at sports, right? Sports means that, like, you have to practice things over and over again. But I think at the end of the day, what's the thought process behind it? I think actually think this is the answer right here. So the thought process that your son had, where he was like, oh, this is so hard, that created that. That made that hard, instead of being like, oh, this can be fun though. This
Yeah.
is like how, like, this is what I'm like trying to, and this is totally a whole nother topic. We got to talk about this because I'm getting really excited about this right now. But how can I think about the exact same situation in a better way so that I create something different? This is literally exactly what I've been doing in my life, because this is where that tightness in my throat comes, the tightness in my hip and my leg. It's because I'm thinking about something and I'm like, it has to get done now. This is going to be hard. This is going to be tough. I got to get this done, blah, 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 blah. Like, trying to control the situation. And
Mhm.
so, how can I think about it totally different, where I can be like, no, actually, I'm having a good time doing this? How do I have
Mhm.
more fun doing this? Right? That's the balance between the masculine and the feminine, right? Finding that balance of doing the physical in this
Yeah.
3D reality, but doing it in a fun, I enjoy this way, instead of going, oh, I hate this. This hurts me. This doesn't feel good, right? Like, my sports mind says, oh, I need to lift this weight because it's like, I gotta be strong enough to do the thing that I want to do. Whereas, instead of thinking of, I gotta do this, the thought needs to change to, like, the of how much fun I can have as I grow my muscles, right? So it's a different way to look at it in the exact same situation, right?
Yeah. Well,
That's
and
the thought.
that's the hard part of teaching the kids. That's what I'm
Yeah.
struggling with, is like how you teach the kids that hard is fun, because they're so used to just drowning on a tablet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And um anything that actually takes strenuous exercise is painful, and that's bad, you know? And so I don't want to teach them that mindset I had of like working hard is the only way
Right.
to survive,
Right.
but like they're fucking pansies. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
gotta find a way to get them like working
Excited.
hard too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I
it
don't
comes
know.
down to passion, the passion. And I'm a Scorpio, so I'm all about passion, right?
Mhm.
So it's figuring out how to teach that passion to somebody. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think screens just completely destroy that.
Yeah, totally. We got to talk about this next time, but we got to wrap
Yeah.
up now. So,
Yeah.
friends, if you're listening to us, thanks for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, a subscribe. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast host, give us a 5-star. Let us know in the comments what you think as well. So, but with that, we're going to call TMI Advice You Didn't Want a wrap for today. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.